Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. John Sundvold has been part of our Kansas City sports consciousness since the late 1970s when he was a two-time All-State player at Blue Springs and a high-scoring and assisting point guard for the Blue Springs team. Then it was on to the University of Missouri for 4 years and, along with Steve Stepanovich, leading the Tigers, and with many other fine players as well, to 4 consecutive Big 8 championships. This led to World Cup teams and international play, and eventually to the NBA as well as a first-round draft choice of the Seattle Supersonics. He carved out a 10-year career as a rotation player in the NBA, and then injuries forced him to move into retirement, where, of course, as the achiever that he is, and with the tenacious nature that he carries with him, despite his amiability, he moved into the business world and eventually created his own business as a financial advisor. During this time as well, he became a television analyst, first a radio analyst, but then first a radio analyst, then quickly into the television side, and he was really, really good at it, and he still is. But he never quite fully embraced it, wanting to spend more time on his business and his family. He could have risen to the very top in that regard, but still does it and does it well, and we get the pleasure of seeing him on the SEC network these days. He's also a fantastic storyteller, and you will find that out because over the next 2 weeks, we will have a 2-part Kansas City Profile with John Sundvold right here on Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing on the Reasonably Irreverent podcast. We're here with Joe Spiker, the CEO and president of Easton Roofing. And Joe, you had a great year in 2019, a record year. 2020 comes, things are moving smoothly along, and then the coronavirus comes. But your company seemed to be very ready, very proactive, and very ready to serve your customers well.
Yeah, we adopted social distancing very early before the cities even put out the notices. And we started working from home. We are largely cloud-based as a company, so that transition was easy. Our technicians are wearing masks and gloves, and salespeople are not meeting with homeowners. We're doing everything digitally and doing everything we can to do our part to get over this as quickly as possible.
So for any needs that people have right now, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can always call us, 913-257-5426. But the best way is to go to eastonroofing.com, put your information in, and we'll give you a call.
Easton Roofing, integrity matters. It's time now to get some great assistance on healthcare with Chad Beisel from no-nonsense-healthcareninja.com. And Chad, even your business's name would indicate that you have a real aggressive way and an important way to go after some health insurance for your clients.
What I've found out in the industry is just a lot of people are really confused. They don't know what plans are good, what their plans offer, how they cover. And so I've just taken the approach of being really educated on what options are available to clients and showing them all the options that are available and making sure they understand them so they can pick and choose what options are good for them.
And one thing that's really important, of course, is access to doctors and hospitals.
Absolutely. That's becoming a big issue for a lot of people. Some of the plans out there are going to restrict those clients to where they can and cannot go. So if you live just outside the Kansas City metro, some of the counties outside, you may not be able to go to some of the hospitals up here in the Kansas City area. So making sure that you have a plan that's got doctors and hospitals and places you want to go is really, really important today.
Learn more by visiting no-nonsense-healthcareninja.com and let Chad help you. Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production, to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Vision's goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. I'm here with Tim Emerson, the owner of Emerson & Company. And Tim, give us an idea of the range of services that you provide from Emerson & Company.
At Emerson & Company, we do credit card processing, payroll services. We do bookkeeping, merchant accounts like point-of-sale systems.
What would you say differentiates you from other companies in the field, and what makes you special?
I think what makes us unique is that we're a small local business making regional decisions on companies. We create a profile for the business and then put it out to our different vendors in a very competitive environment and tailor those needs to the specific business, which usually ends up in a great fit or great result for the company.
And, of course, the idea is to save money, right?
Save money, and actually sometimes I'm surprised where actually a solution that may cost a little bit more ultimately does save money, but we're not conditioned to think like that sometimes.
Emerson and Company. Check them out at emerson-co.com or call them at 816-360-9092.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
John, you were born in South Dakota and lived there for a few years and then moved on to Nebraska. Tell me about the early years of John Sundvold as the youngest of four boys.
Yeah, I was born Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So my parents, my mom grew up on a farm between Sioux Falls and Canton, which is all in the southeast corner of South Dakota. My mom was probably one of six in her family on a farm. My dad grew up in a small town named Canton, which is back then, 2,200 people. And they were high school sweethearts, homecoming king, queen, got married at 18. First child, my brother Bob, was born at their age of 20. So they had their first child at 20, and I was born when they were 26. So they had four boys. I'm the youngest. Bob's the oldest. I've got a brother, Scott, who's 4 years older than me. Bob's 6 years older. My brother, Stuart, is 3 years older. So four kids. We lived in Sioux Falls a little bit. I don't remember that, but we moved to Canton, and I grew up in Canton, South Dakota up until the third grade. We moved away from Canton. My dad was in the sales business. He was transferred to Nebraska. And we moved to Seward, Nebraska, which is about 20 miles west of Lincoln. So from 1970 to 73, my brother Bob actually graduated from Seward High School. And back then, in those 3 years, the Cornhuskers won 2 national championships. So it was, to our family, it was kind of a rude awakening to see how big and how bold Big Red football meant to the community. But it was fun. And then in 73, my dad got transferred down to Kansas City, and he selected Blue Springs for us to live. And so I was just starting my 7th grade year. So that's kind of the how I got to Blue Springs. And then from then on, my parents are still alive and doing well in Blue Springs today.
Was that were you young enough for 7th grade that wasn't a real uprooting from Nebraska, or was it?
Well, it's always an uprooting. I think what made it easy, each moves aren't easy on kids. We didn't have a choice. My dad said, we're moving. When you have four boys within 6 years, we were pretty close, competitive. It was the oldest and youngest, Bob and myself, versus the two middle ones in whatever game, wiffle ball, baseball, basketball, football. And so when we moved to Nebraska, basically we got out and we just started playing, and then kids from around the neighborhoods would come over to our place. When we moved to Blue Springs, we moved middle of August, late August. It was right before school started. And obviously my brother Bob was graduated. He was going to go to Platt Junior College up in Nebraska to play basketball. So he stayed up there. So the three boys moved with my mom and dad. And I think the first week I got to Blue Springs, I remember going to a little sports shop on Main Street in Blue Springs to line up for Little League football and standing next to two or three kids that I met. And they've kind of been friends ever since, but, standing outside to go get a physical to play Little League football. So right away, you kind of jump into the sports world and you get friends right away. So, yeah, uprooting's not easy, but there aren't many choices, and sports probably helped the Sundvold brothers adapt easier than maybe if we didn't play.
And being the youngest, a lot of times that's going to create tremendous competition, and you're always going to be playing up a level or two, perhaps, and I imagine you feel like that helped.
Yeah, obviously, being the youngest, you're probably a little more independent, maybe a little more ornery think for yourself a little bit. But we were so close in age that I followed those guys everywhere. And so in South Dakota, playing every kind of sport with older kids. When I got to Nebraska, the Sundvold brothers would. There was a college in Seward, Nebraska, Concordia Teachers College. It's a Lutheran college. We used to sneak into an old gym. You could kind of get through this one window and sneak in to play basketball at night, or we'd go to the new gym that they had where college kids were playing. And my brothers were going, and here I was in grade school, 5th and 6th grade. But, my brothers were nice enough to let me play. I was athletic enough to play with older kids. I was a fast kid. I wasn't big by any means, and probably scrawny, but like everybody else, but I was fast enough to play whatever sport was being played. So, when you're the youngest, you're tagging along. You might get a few more bumps and bruises along the way, but my brothers were good to let me play. Sometimes they didn't accept the fact that, like, if we were playing basketball, that I might shoot it from outside a little too far, but it didn't bother me any. But it was good. I mean, it was the thing about having an older brother, 6 years older. I could always kind of look up to Brother Bob and try to do what he was doing. And so, for instance, we all ran track and field. My brother Bob was a pole vaulter. I was a pole vaulter. He ran the high hurdles. I ran the high hurdles. And I would mark down what his best was at whatever age. And that goal of mine was to beat that time. So whatever he ran as a senior in high school, I was trying to beat as a sophomore in high school. Whatever he pole vaulted, I was going to try to beat those numbers. So that was probably a good thing for a kid like me to have, because he was 6 years is quite a difference. And so I could look up to him, admire his friends, watch what they did, enjoy sitting, listen behind the corner to their stories of a high school football game or a basketball game. But it allowed me to be around sports a ton as a young kid.
So when would you say that you started to feel like you had some aptitude at, well, any of the sports? Obviously, you were putting up the times and the heights and everything of a much older brother. But in any of the sports, when did you start to feel like you had some real aptitude?
Well, I think, the oddity of if you're gifted, and I was gifted, I'll be honest. I had fast feet. I had quick hands, hand-eye coordination. So any sports, unusual for people that wouldn't know, and I mentioned already pole vaulting. We were pole vaulting in Canton, South Dakota when I was in the 2nd and 3rd grade, and people will think, well, how in the heck do you get into pole vaulting? Well, the reality was, in this tiny town of Canton, 2,200 people, the football coach was also the track coach, and he basically had every kid in that community, running track. And so the Sundvold boys, with the help of my dad was a terrific high school athlete, good pitcher in baseball, basketball player, good track athlete. We actually, our backyard was just a dirt yard because every sport was played at our place, but we had basically a pole vault pit, a mattress so we landed on our feet. We had 2 wooden standards that might have gone up to 8 feet. We would go to the carpet store. Carpet used to come in bamboo poles. So the carpet owner would make sure that he kept the straightest of the bamboo poles, and we got them, and we'd tape them up, and we used those as our poles. So I think as a kid, I was always gifted enough to play. Then when you move, you're always challenged because you're the new kid in town. When we moved to Seward, Nebraska, I was in the 3rd grade, and we moved in March. So I had a month and a half left of school, which that's even harder because you come in and you're a new kid to a new class. But the first recess, and I remember it well, the first recess, I'm on the bad team of kickball, right? I'm on the bad team of kickball. The next day, I was on the good team of kickball. Let's just put it that way. So it was that's a tougher move because you got to kind of prove yourself. But for the most part, I was, as a kid, elementary school, I was playing up with my brother Stuart, who was 3 years older than me, on some baseball teams, on some basketball teams. And so what I don't know if I thought I was any better, but I played with older kids most of the time.
And in what sport? I know you really like track and field, and we'll get to that at the end of that story eventually. But it sounds like you really just had a love for everything and an aptitude for everything. And I guess aptitude does create love in some regards. If something is you're good at, that's great as well. How about basketball? When did you really feel like that might be your thing?
We played. I did play everything. We played football in football season, and basketball, and then track, and then played baseball in the summer. Basketball-wise, again, I'll go back to Canton, South Dakota. I can remember going to the high school games. My dad would take us to all the sporting events, but we'd go to football games. But I can remember going to basketball games. And when I was a kid, second and third grade, the Canton Seahawks had a player by the name of Bill Christensen. And Bill Christensen was a great shooter. In my eyes, as a second grader, he was a great shooter. I don't know what his stats were. I don't remember all those things, but I remember Bill Christensen. And so me as a kid in our backyard, would shoot day and night when I came home. And obviously in South Dakota back then there was a lot of snow. It didn't matter to us. I was outside in gloves and shooting the basketball, trying to be Bill Christensen. And so basketball was one of those things, besides the other sports, but it was one that I think attracted me the most in the fact that maybe I was an introverted, semi-shy kid, but I could practice basketball on my own.
Right.
I didn't have to rely on anybody else. I could pitch a baseball against a wall like kids do, and we did that. But basketball was the one thing I thought, okay, I can shoot all day. I can dribble. I can do a lot of things without kids around. And so I think that probably helped in the fact that was the sport that I probably gravitated to as I got to high school, that was the sport I was going to focus on more than any.
How did the structure of high school basketball go? Usually in those days, I played high school basketball, and you didn't really play if you were a freshman, even if you were good enough. There was a lot of pecking order stuff going on there, but somebody who was as good as you were and would become, how did that process go in high school?
So when I moved to Blue Springs, 7th grade, you had Little League basketball. 8th grade, we had team basketball. 9th grade, Blue Springs wasn't a big place like it is today. But 9th grade, we were still in a separate building from high school, and nobody really played up. But at the end of the high school had a new coach from Iowa, Cal Hickman. And Coach Hickman, so I had a brother. My brother Stuart would have been a senior on the team, and I was a freshman on the freshman team. And we had a very good freshman team. I had great teammates that excelled in a lot of sports. But at the end of my freshman season, the head coach, Cal Hickman, came over, and we sat in the bleachers, and he said, what I'd like to do is bring you up and play the last 2 weeks of the season because you'll be playing for us next year. Now, they didn't have a great team. They were just okay. And so the idea was probably for me to play 4 games and then go to districts, but we would have lost in districts. They weren't. But my brother Stuart played somewhat the same, but he was a guard. They had 3 seniors that rotated at guards. And I remember telling Coach Hickman, I think I'm fine. I don't want to do what you're asking. I think I'll just go run track next week. It starts for us in junior high. And I told my dad. My dad thought a good idea, and only because, again, my brother Stuart was playing and 2 other seniors. I thought it might be a bad mix. Here I am, this scrawny little kid coming in, and they were a senior-related team. And I just told the coach, hey, I'll be there next year, and we'll get it going from there. So, I waited till I was a sophomore, and then, our class was pretty good, and I finally then got to play varsity basketball then.
And did that go well right away?
Yeah, it did. It was interesting. As any sophomore, I think today's may be different. Kids expect to play. I thought if I started, that'd just be good enough. And so I remember the first game, I think we played Truman High School. And we didn't win. We didn't play very well. And I remember I came home and I was a sophomore starting. That's all that was seemingly important.
Right.
But my dad had he wasn't so pleased when I walked in the door. he said, "What in the heck?" He probably didn't use the word heck. "Are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I really could care less to watch the game that you played tonight." And I was a little bit taken back, but I'm thinking, hey, I did fine because the seniors are fine. And, well, my dad kind of laid into me about the number of hours I'd practice in the summer, and you got 2 games during the week to play. You are he basically said, you're one of the best players on the team. You've got to, I don't care if you're a sophomore, show leadership, show ability, show this. He had a lot of things that he was going through that, and I sit and listened. It just so happened the next game that we played, the team that we played had a sophomore that was playing, and I'd played against him as a freshman. And so maybe my comfort level playing against that kid. But I probably had 20 or 22, and then that kind of started for the rest of the year. I averaged in the 20s. And it was received fine because the seniors on our team were really good guys. Not all great basketball players, but good guys. And, you know, we weren't a great team, but good enough. But I probably would not have made the right stride if my dad wouldn't have laid into me and said, you know, don't just be happy that you're there. Now prove how good you can be. So, you know, from that year, then my junior year, we had a terrific team, and my senior year. You know, it's funny. You think of Blue Springs back in those days, wasn't a big town. But we, you know, I had a team when I was a senior. There was a sophomore on our team named Steve Harris. Steve,
right,
actually 2 years later went to Tulsa, was an All-American, was a first-round draft pick by the Easton Rockets. Played, I don't know, 5 or 6 years in the NBA. He passed away a few years ago of cancer. But so now you're looking on a team that has think of this, that had 2 NBA first-round picks.
Right.
We had 2 of my friends, Scott Middleton, who went to Southwest Missouri State to play baseball, played in the minor leagues of baseball. Shane Fairbanks went to the University of Missouri to play baseball, played in the minor leagues of baseball. Shane's son, Peter Fairbanks, is the great relief pitcher now for the Tampa Bay Rays that were in the World Series. So you're looking at a team. We had another kid that went to Southwest Baptist. We had a terrific group of athletes in Blue Springs, even though the town wasn't very big. But it was kind of fun for us to play and to do as well as we could.
How did your? I think when we talked earlier, you mentioned that you never were able to make the big postseason run. Was that disappointing in high school?
Yeah, my junior year we made state, and to get to the Final Four, we had to play Liberty High School, and they had Robert Estes, and Robert went on to play at Iowa State. They beat us. I think it was overtime. Might be wrong, but I think it got to overtime, and we had 4 of our starters fouled out.
Mm-hmm.
I was still in there, but so Robert's team beat us from Liberty, and then my senior year, we had a great year. 3 or 4 times we went over 100 points. That's with 8-minute quarters, no
right,
shot clock,
right.
No time clocks, or no 3-point line. We got beat by a team, William Chrisman, who had really a terrific team. Now, we'd beaten them twice during the season, and they got us. The regional was at Truman High School, and they were led by Russ Mormon, and Russ became a baseball player. I think maybe even played with the Royals franchise. Russ was a great guy, ran track against him. So, yeah, disappointed that you don't make it to the Final Four to play in Columbia. When I was a senior, you know, the big deal the matchup was going to be Blue Springs, our school, against Smith, Steve Stepanovich school. We didn't quite make it. They made it, and they won the championship. But, yeah, disappointed, but, you know, you moved on to the next thing, basically.
I know that at the end of your senior year in basketball, you played in some kind of a national event, and that led to the fact that you couldn't participate in one of your big loves, the track and field, that senior year.
Yeah, so I grew up a track and field guy. I mean, I was always a runner. And so throughout my youth in Nebraska, I was running, I was hurdling, I was pole vaulting. Got to Missouri, did the same thing. Great story when I was a 7th grader, again, that first year in Blue Springs. Got done with basketball season. Now we're going to go out for track. Track coach, like any coach back then, I mean, you get a bunch of kids and you're going to teach them either high jump or triple jump. So he mentioned one time, he said, there's even something called the pole vault. I'm sure no one's pole vaulted. And again, I'm this scrawny little kid, and I raised my hand and said I'd pole vaulted. And he asked, so you pole vaulted? I said, yes, sir. And he said, what do you pole vault with? And I said, a bamboo pole, and he laughed. And I said, well, it's taped up. It's firm. He said, have you ever used a fiberglass pole? And I said, no, sir, but my brother Bob had. He pole vaulted in high school. But anyway, he let me use a steel pole. He wanted to see if I really knew how to pole vault with a steel pole. Now, steel pole is very difficult because it has no give. But again, I run down. I'm a sprinter, so I run down, plant the pole. My speed carries me up. I go over a bar, maybe 7.5, 8 feet high. And he said, okay, you're good. We'll now have pole vault on this deal. So anyway, through my junior high, track and field was fun for me. Summertime, there were kind of AAU events. I don't know what they call them. Junior Olympic type deals. Kansas Relays or something had one that I went to. Kids from national kids were there. So I was a hurdler and pole vaulter and competed on kind of a national level. But anyway, so I get through my high school year, my junior year, I get hurt during districts. And I would say back then as a junior, I was probably top 3 to 4 in the hurdles in the state and top 3 or 4 in the pole vault. Had a chance to win either or maybe both, who knows, and got hurt in districts. And so my senior year, and I was looking forward to it, basketball was over. I think the recruiting process had not yet been done as far as basketball signings. You couldn't sign early back in the day. And I was going to play basketball, and I was being recruited by many, many teams in the West and areas. But I was invited to play in an all-star game, basketball, down in Texas. And the invite it was going to be the U.S. All-Stars versus the Texas All-Stars. And I don't know all the kids on the Texas team. I mean, Clyde Drexler, Rob Williams, they had great players. But the U.S. team, myself, Isaiah Thomas, it was quite an honor to get to go. And so my parents went and my high school coach. So I play the game. I come back, quite a thing. I start running track, and in high school you have these indoor meets, and I don't know if they still do, but Warrensburg, Central Missouri State, had a great indoor facility, and you always had these indoor meets. And so I was about to get on the bus for the first meet that I was going to perform in, and my high school coach, Gary Parker, who was a Mizzou grad and a great hurdler at the University of Missouri, came on the bus and said, hey, come here a second. And he was disappointed, and I could see it in his face. He said, hey, you can't go. And I said, what's going on? He said, well, the event you played in last week wasn't sanctioned by the state of Missouri that you could play in. So because of that, you can't play in a spring sport. So my track was done, and it was disappointing because I had buddies that were on the track team. Those bus rides were fun, whether if you went to St. Joe or you went wherever you went, you're a track team. It was an individual sport. You cheered your buddies on, and whatever sport they were doing, they cheered you on. You got on the bus, had some sunflower seeds and went home. So I missed that camaraderie, but the rest of the way, all I did every day, I went in the gym afterwards and worked out with Steve Harris. That's what we did every day.
Well, that's certainly a good train. Two future NBA first-round draft choices getting after it.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Firsthand, I have enjoyed the benefits of the CBD products from Canaway. My back feels better and better these days, as a major part of my routine are the pain-relieving salve and the Pure Gold oil. And recently, I had the pleasure of a treatment session using the Canaway CBD in conjunction with the Microlight 830 cold laser. The non-invasive treatment session worked wonders, and I could barely tell I was even being touched. TML 830 is the first 3B cold laser to get FDA approval, and in addition, the combination treatment with CBD is patent pending. The new smart laser is the only hands-free cold laser in the world and is used by athletic trainers, chiropractors, MDs, physical therapists, and veterinarians everywhere. You can learn more about all the great benefits from the complete line of Canaway CBD products by contacting my friend Sherry McCants at 515-208-6312. That's 515-208-6312 to to get outstanding information about Canaway.
Hi, everybody. This is Matt Llewellyn from 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence. I just want to thank everybody for supporting local restaurants during this time of uncertainty. 23rd Street Brewery is now open until this pandemic is over. And right now, more than anything, local restaurants need your help and support. Come on out and see us. 23rd Street Brewery is open now from 11:30 till 9 o'clock for dine-in and carry-out. And whatever we can do to help you out, maybe with your catering needs, too. I appreciate all the support, and thank you for continuing to shop local.
It's time to visit once again with Dr. Brad Woodle of Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. And Dr. Brad, your group has reached a significant milestone in receiving a prestigious award.
Danny, we've been honored for the 10th year in a row to receive the 5-Star Service Award from Integrity Doctors. And what this means is that all of our offices throughout Kansas City have made sure to give people excellent chiropractic and acupuncture care, be on time, and do a very complete and thorough job, and have great responses back from patients.
I know firsthand because I was just treated, for instance, today by you. You have a wide range of fantastic services.
Absolutely. Chiropractic, acupuncture, physiotherapies, rehab, anything that you need to keep you well in bones, muscles, joints, and nerves.
And I can't say how much it's benefited me in the time I've coming here, upwards of 2 years. My back has improved 100%. And you can have that same kind of treatment too. For more information and your chance for a healthier way of life, visit asfca.com/Danny today. Most of us have experienced auto accidents, and it's no fun. And even less fun is trying to work on the insurance aspects afterwards and getting full value after an auto accident. I'm here with David Cowan from RecExpert.com. And David, you have an unusual and important niche for people after an auto accident.
We have a passion to teach car wreck clients what they deserve. Getting your car repaired only fixes the damage and the paint. Getting paid for your car's loss in value is called diminished value. Chances are you've never heard of this before because most people aren't looking out for you. We help people collect thousands to tens of thousands of dollars for their car's loss in value after the wreck.
And if somebody wants to come to you for that, what's the original assessment cost them?
We offer a free review of any insurance claim to see how we can help.
You can't beat that. Great expertise and assistance in getting full value after an auto accident from David Cowan. Visit RecExpert.com and learn more. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyKlinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. Throughout your high school career, you really didn't think for a long time that you were going to be a high Division I recruit. That just wasn't in your wheelhouse. You told me a really funny story about Isaiah Thomas, and you thought everybody was as good as Isaiah Thomas around the country. So you thought there were thousands of people you were competing with when really there's only one Isaiah Thomas. But the process of you absolutely, positively being recruited by the top schools didn't happen right away, right?
Well, so again, my brothers, Bob played junior college. And then he was an all-state player in Nebraska, played junior college at Platte College in Nebraska, and then went to South Dakota State, a Division II school. My brother Scott played junior college at Penn Valley Junior College. Now, Scott's a genius, and he was always going to be an engineer. So he got his pre-engineering, core engineering work, or whatever he got at Penn Valley, and then was going to go to University of Missouri Rolla, now called S&T, but University of Rolla to get his engineering degree. So he played junior college. He played with Clay Johnson, who back then averaged 20 points, 20 rebounds in junior college. If none of you remember that, but Clay's one of the all-time great players from Kansas City. Clay played at Mizzou, and then Clay and I were teammates in Seattle one year. So these are my brothers. And then Scott could have played Division II, and he was going to school in Rolla. They wanted him to play. I'm a kid I'm in high school at home thinking, oh, he'll play. Why wouldn't you play? But basically he told the coach, no, I'm not here to play basketball. I'm here to be a student. So my thought of being to get scholarships was I'll probably go play junior college. Now this is because I'm in 8th or 9th grade watching my brothers.
Right.
I did go to a camp at Iowa. My coach, Cal Hickman, he took us to the University of Iowa camp, Lute Olson's camp. I was going to be a freshman in high school, so to speak. So I get there, and they had a lot of kids from Chicago. Iowa recruited a lot of kids from Chicago. So you're playing, and there was another freshman that was really, really good named Isaiah Thomas. And Isaiah I think I made the all-star team for like the 9th and 10th graders. Isaiah made the all-star team for the 11th and 12th graders. I mean, he was the best I've ever seen, and to this day, probably the best I've ever played against at that height, at 6'2". But when I came home, my mindset was there must be thousands of Isaiah. That's only one kid. There's got to be 1,000 of those kids. So when I became a sophomore, my buddies were going to pick me up for the first day on August 15th of football practice. And I remember looking at it, it was about 104 degrees outside, and I said, I'm not going. And my buddies were like, what do you mean you're not playing? I said, no, I'm not playing. I'm going to just work on basketball. And my mom was inside. My mom said, well, you better call your dad. And I called my dad, and I said, hey, I'm going to work on basketball. That's what I want to do. He said, fine. You're not going to mess around then. That's what you're going to do. But again, in my mind, there were Isaiah Thomases. And a funny story, my dad, after he got out of sales visit, he actually bought a little lumberyard in Blue Springs when we moved, after we moved about a year. He had worked in a lumberyard as a kid. So he buys a lumberyard. I'm working in a lumberyard once in a while. I didn't work there very much. I mowed yards because if I mowed yards, I could get them done sooner. And it was better than the $1 per hour that my dad was paying me to load lumber. And my dad used to laugh. My close friend Scott Middleton and I, we'd load trucks for $1 per hour. Then we'd go to the pizza buffet deal for $2.99, and my dad would shake his head going, you sappy dude, you just spent all your money. So I would rather mow yards in the neighborhood, and then I could, go play basketball. So anyway, the best thing about the lumberyard was, now this is the mid to late 70s. I graduated in 79 from high school. Blue Springs was a great place for many of the Royals players that lived there. Amos Otis, Paul Splittorff, Busby, I think maybe Dennis Leonard, Al Fitzmaurice. So a lot of those guys would come in the lumberyard, and, they knew my dad. My dad, Bert Sundvold, hey, Bert, I'm building a swing set for my kids. What do I need? Well, so I'm a, 9th, 10th grader out there loading sacks of Sackcrete or whatever, whatever they had to do, they'd call out the lumberyard and we'd have to do it. So one time, Paul Splittorff's in, and he sees my dad say, hey, Bert, is John here? And it's probably after my sophomore year. Now, many of those guys used to come to our games. Whitey Herzog probably came to every game when I was a senior, and they were very visible. Now, I'm going to change all the stories, but when we were playing my senior year, if you didn't have a seat in the gym by the halftime of the JV game, you didn't have a seat.
Right.
So it was noticeable when the Royals guys came in. And this was in their heyday, when they were great, losing those playoff games to the Yankees, their playoff series.
Right.
So anyway, Paul Splittorff comes and says, hey, Bert, is John here? So my dad, calls out on the intercom, hey, John, come to the front. So I come in there, and here's Paul Splittorff, the Yankee killer, right? Here, and he said, hey, John, he goes, I played basketball at Morningside College up in Iowa. So Morningside was part of the North Central Conference. My dad grew up in Canton, loved the North Central Conference. My brother Bob played North Central Conference. South Dakota State, Mankato, Morningside. A great level of basketball. But anyway, so Paul Splittorff said, this was after my sophomore year, he said, hey, you're really terrific. And I'm calling the Morningside coach to say they should recruit you. Now, again, I'm thinking my path to basketball and a scholarship to a college is through junior college. So I walked away thinking, gosh, he thinks I could play Division II. That'd be like my brother Bob, right? I could play at that level. So the next year happened. This is a true story. Next year happened. My junior year, I explode a little bit more on the scene, maybe a little bit nationwide, but especially in Kansas City, scoring a lot of points, doing whatever. Blue Springs, we started winning games. I'm in the lumberyard again, working however many hours I worked. Split comes in. And he comes back, he parked his car, he comes in the back and said, hey, come here a second. I said, how are you? And he goes, great. He said, remember when I mentioned Morningside last year? I said, yes, sir. He goes, don't you worry about that. Don't you worry about it. You got other places you're going. So, but the funny part is, it was after my junior, I was already starting getting letters. The first letter I probably ever received probably was Missouri. The other one would have been Nebraska, where I grew up. They had somehow kept track who my brother was. And so the letters from all the Midwest schools, and early on it was the Southwest schools and the Midwest schools, the Big Eight and the Southwest Conference. And then I played in an all-star game, or no, it was a camp, the BC camp out in Milledgeville, Georgia, before my senior year. So out there, the all-star game was Dominique Wilkins, Sam Bowie, Ralph Sampson, Stepanovic, Isaiah, John Paxson. I mean, Antoine Carr was there. The class of 79 was phenomenal talent. Dale Ellis was there, Byron Scott. And those kind of places get you really noticed.
Right.
And the funny one is I got a call. I was getting these letters from everybody sends a form letter, correct? You know, you get these form letters from every school. But the funny one was always from Iona. And the coach at Iona was Jim Valvano.
Right.
And they had Jeff Rutledge was an All-American. But anyway, my coach, Cal Hickman, during my senior year said, hey, there's a guy on the phone that wants to talk to you from Iona. And so this was Jim Valvano, and he was funny as heck, had seen me play at Milledgeville, Georgia. And he's telling me all this thing. I barely know where Iona still don't know. But it was kind of comical now when I look back to think which people were calling you. And back then there's no cell phones, right? So they're calling your coach's office at a high school. So it was really a progression that I wasn't in junior high thinking I'm going to play at University of Missouri or somewhere like that. I assumed watching my brothers that this is the path. My dad didn't go to college. So we were all going to college, have to go to college, but you're paying your own way. And for most of us, athletically was the best way we could pay for it. My brother Scott, because he was so smart, he did it with athletics, and then he did academics.
When it came time to choose a school, obviously you had a lot of good choices, and there are a lot of big programs, and you're, at this point now, a tremendously high-profile recruit. How did it end up that you went to Mizzou?
Well, it's funny. As you go through the process, and you get calls, you talk to a Bobby Knight on the phone, or you talk to Eddie Sutton was at Arkansas. I was not necessarily a Missouri fan. Again, from South Dakota to Nebraska, the grade school in Nebraska, those are the years. I was kind of a Cornhusker guy. We moved to Missouri. I was a student of the game. Like, I watched everything. So I remember Lon Kruger at Kansas State. And I was a huge fan of Chucky Williams and Mike Evans at Kansas State, the purple pop gun shooters. I wanted to shoot like them. I mimicked their moves. You do all those things. All the great Kansas players. When Clay Johnson went to Missouri and went with Willie Smith. So you watched all those people. So the recruiting process, after it winds and whittles down of this and that, I visited Texas. Abe Lemons was a coach. They had a great team that had just won the NIT the year before. They had a kid named Krevax, who was a white kid that came off picks and shot the heck out of it. So then they would send me game tapes, that were the old reel tapes, right? It came in the container, and you put it on a projector. And they would say, this is going to be you. And this kid, he's shooting everything. So I had Texas. I had Arkansas, who was the arch rival of Texas, recruited me. Different type of style. Eddie Sutton was a little more close to the vest. They had the great Sidney Moncrief down there when I visited. I liked Kansas State. Obviously, I was a big Jack Hartman fan. Kansas was Kansas. And then Missouri. Norm Stewart was maybe the most honest of everybody. Tough in his way. He basically said you could be good for Mizzou or Missouri, and Missouri will be good for you. And he thought as a state kid. So the process was winding down. Again, there's no early signings. So now you're at the end of your senior year. I wasn't running track. I was in the gym every day. Gary Gardner, assistant coach from Missouri, would come to my high school every day. And he did this for over a month. And I would tell him, Coach, you don't have to come see me every day. And he said, yeah, but I want to. And on the other side of the state, George Schultz, another assistant coach from Missouri, was going to DeSmet High School every day to see Steve Stepanovic. And Steve and I had met a couple of Mizzou games when they'd invite you down to come watch a game. And they'd sit Steve and I together, and we'd visit. And Steve had gone to a Catholic high school. And the assumption, and he was one of the, I'd say, top three recruits in the country. You had Ralph Sampson, Sam Bowie, Steve Stepanovich, like the big three of the centers. So when I was looking at schools, I was thinking I need to go where a good centers is because I wanted to win. And so LaSalle Thompson, in my grade, same grade, was going to go to Texas. He and I were on the same recruiting visit. Scott Hastings was a year older, was going to be a future All-American. He was at Arkansas. I thought, okay, he's only 1 year older. That's good. And we all assumed, I say we, most people back then thought that Steve was going to Notre Dame, Catholic school, Notre Dame, high profile, Digger Phelps, all that stuff. So as we got down closer, and I had one more visit to go to Arkansas, either the Saturday or the Sunday of the Final Four between Bird and Magic, that game was played on a Monday, Steve calls me. Again, local landline to my house. And I'm in my dad's office, and Steve and I are talking. And he said, "What are you thinking?" I said, "I'm not sure. I got one more visit to Arkansas. I really like Arkansas. Still have Missouri on my mind." And I said, "Are you going to Notre Dame?" He said, "I don't know." So here's two 17-year-olds, and I don't know who said it first. We could both go to Mizzou. And I said, "Okay, I still want to take my visit down to Arkansas. I know you're set, so you're going to announce." I thought it was going to be later in the week. But, so anyway, we hung up. I didn't tell my parents, didn't tell anybody. So that Monday of the Bird Magic game, Monday afternoon after school, I'm in the gym with Steve Harris. And Gary Gardner walks in, excited. "Did you hear the news?" Again, no social media, right? There's none of stuff out there. I said, "What news, Coach?" He said, "Steve Stepanovich is going to Missouri. He had a press conference. He had a big thing, and he said he hopes his good friend John Sundvold's coming too." And I stared at Coach Gardner, and I said, "Really?" And I'm thinking, that big dummy. I mean, I thought we just had agreed not to yet say anything.
Right.
So I went back. I was still shooting, and then I acted like I was going to go to the bathroom. I went in the back, called my mom, said, "I think I'm going to tell Coach Gardner I'm going to Missouri." My mom said, "Call your dad." I called my dad. My dad said, "Okay, that's great. Call the coaches at Texas, call the coaches at Arkansas, call the guys at K-State." I said, "Okay." So I called the leading guy that was recruiting me from each school. And then I came out to Coach Gardner and said, "Hey, I'm going to go to Missouri." And he just had this look on his face. Thought I was kidding. I said, "No, I'm going to Missouri." He said, "You don't need a press conference?" I said, No, I'm going to Missouri." He said, "Well, let's go call Coach Stewart." So he's running down the hall, and Norm being Norm, that I'm sure it was probably a great phone call with him and his assistant coaches in Salt Lake, but he acted calm and cool. He said, "Well, good. You're going to be terrific here, and we're going to try to play the best teams we can when you get here." So that was how it happened, and it was really two 17-year-olds on the phone thinking, okay, maybe we should just stay home. And one was from St. Louis area, and I was from Kansas City, so it worked out well.
It certainly did work out well, and you guys would win the Big 8 championship all 4 years there and had an unbelievable run and were highly ranked often, played a lot of high-profile non-conference games too. I mean, I guess in the end it couldn't have worked out any better for you and Stipo.
Yeah, I mean, the frustrating part, we didn't make a Final Four, and I get, but if I look back, and what Norm Stewart promised was that we will try to play the best competition we can to see how good you are or we are. And he kept that promise. My freshman year, we played DePaul in Kansas City. DePaul just come off a Final Four, Mark Aguirre and Clyde Bradshaw, and we had Larry Drew. So that first year that we won the league, now Missouri had won in 76 with Willie Smith and Kim Anderson, but it had been 30 years, I think, prior to that, or 40, that there had been a conference championship. So now we're winning this in Larry Drew's senior year. Now, Larry was a first-round draft pick. Again, one of the great players ever out of Kansas City and ever out of the University of Missouri. I tagged along for the ride as a freshman. Stepanovich was great, Curtis Berry, Ricky Frazier. I had some moments that they needed because of my shooting. One moment was at Kansas State. We went on the road. Jack Hartman had that 3-2 defense. And I'll never forget, during warm-ups, Larry Drew comes to me and says, "I need you tonight. You got to shoot it out." And I hit 8 or 9 bombs because a senior, took me aside and said, "You're good enough to do this. We need to have it." So we had leadership of Larry Drew. The second championship, I now inherited the mantle of trying to run a team as a sophomore in a probably non-confident way. Steve had a rough going. He had the gun incident, came back a little overweight after the summer. We weren't that good, but midway, maybe the early part of the conference season, a couple things clicked for me. Maybe a word or two from assistant coach Gene Jones helped me a bunch. I had good games against Darnell Valentine, which then that helps your mentality and your psyche because Darnell was an All-American. So we go on a run at the end of that year to win the league. Probably shouldn't have, but we did. And I kind of emerged as maybe a leading guy for this team. Junior year, we were fabulous, with Ricky Frazier leading the way. And then senior year, we lost to Iowa in the second round of the tournament. But in all those championships, you have 4 different makeups of teams and really uniquely different players. I mean, every team's different. But, I mean, the challenge was always there for us to win. And, it was quite successful. It was fun being around Missouri basketball because people were so excited, not only in Columbia, but the state. And what Norman promised us, so we play at DePaul or we play Ralph Sampson or Michael Jordan or Byron Scott, Pat Ewing, Sleepy Floyd, Louisville a couple times. We played the best of the best. And we were on national TV. We didn't win every one of those games, but we won a few. And what it did, it not only put Missouri on the map, but it sure helped guys like Steve Stepanovich and myself in a national picture that allowed maybe, especially a guy like me, to be on All-American teams before my senior year, like whether to take a trip to the Playboy place in Chicago for a week, to be on teams. But that wouldn't have been possible if Norm Stewart would not have scheduled the best of the best to play at any time, at any place, and see how we did.
And, of course, the success was going to eventually lead to the fact that if you're being named a first-team All-American or Playboy All-American, I think there's 12 people on that team, but that means you likely are in the mix to be a high draft choice. When did that start becoming a reality to you?
My biggest reality probably was before my senior year. I'm invited to try out for the World Cup team, 1982. So the Olympics is every 4 years. 80, 84, 88. The World Cup is every 4, but in between the 2 years, 78, 82, 86. So this is back when amateurs could play, not the professionals. So I go and try out, and I don't know if there's 25 or 30-some players. And, it's the best of the best. It's Chris Mullen, and it's all these guys that you knew, and you knew how great they were, and guys who were going to be drafted, and all, when you'd read drafts. Well, I'm one of the 10 guys picked to represent the United States in the world, world basketball. So all of a sudden I'm flying home, and it kind of dawns on me that the guys I just played with are the ones that are mentioned to be drafted. And so my senior year, and again, I became good friends with John Paxson, but John was listed as a guy that could be a first-round draft pick. And I'm all these All-American teams. So then there was a remote possibility that you're going to get drafted because back then there were probably 10 rounds. But could you be a first round? Probably be a second round. And that all became, but that probably dawned on me before my senior year that I got a chance maybe to get a shot to play in the NBA. And just at that point, honestly, for me, from Blue Springs, I thought a tryout would be pretty good. And to be honest, it got better than that.
And it certainly was, and that's where we'll pick it up next week with part 2 of our Kansas City profile of Jon Sundvold right here on the Reasonably Irreverent podcast.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.